Let's Travel is in Tulsa, Oklahoma with travel and tourism entrepreneur Jeffrey Tanenhaus from Tulsa Tours. Hello, Jeffrey. So very welcome on my podcast, and thank you very much for participating. I'm really excited about exploring Tulsa and all it has to offer. So for starters, how did you discover Tulsa?
Hi there. It's great
Uh,
to see you. And I discovered Tulsa on that epic bike trip. I biked across the country from New York to Los Angeles, and I was looking for a new place to call home. And I stopped in lots of different cities, obviously much smaller than New York or LA. And there was something about Tulsa that really spoke to me, that it was very behind in the development curve. And I saw a lot of opportunity here.
hmm. When I mention Tulsa nowadays to friends in Europe, and here I'm in the Los Angeles area, uh, they're like, "Oh my God, that's flyover and what are you talking about?" But Tulsa is really coming on the map. There's a lot of exciting things going on. You are a New Yorker, born and raised. It's a huge change. What do you love about Tulsa?
What I love is that it's small enough, but that it's big enough. There's a nice community feel here. I like knowing the owners of restaurants and places to go out and other people who are making change happen downtown in Tulsa. Whereas in New York, I was just another person, and it's nice to take a step back. I mean, there's a place for big cities for sure, but where I was in my life, I wanted something a little smaller, better work-life balance, and honestly, just to meet nicer people. New Yorkers are nice, but they're very busy. And in Tulsa, we have time to sit and talk.
And as we did, thank you so much. We had a meeting while I was in Tulsa, and it was wonderful to meet you. And I can't wait to come back. You started a touring company, Tulsa Tours, and I found that very exciting. I found you on the web. I was Googling all things Tulsa and found you on the internet. And you're offering incredibly interesting, really hip walking tours. So I would like for you to now tell the industry, what do you have to offer? What is Tulsa Tours?
Great. I'm glad that you discovered me on Google. And I started this company kind of by accident. It was a side hustle to a full-time job that I had in Tulsa doing SEO and content and writing. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, my job suddenly disappeared, and I had time to invest in building out this company. And sort of as we're getting through the pandemic, people are looking for places to go, and Oklahoma is in the middle of it all. We can't jet off to Paris as easily as we used to, and so American domestic travel in America is having a moment over the past 2 years, and people began passing through Oklahoma. They found me, and I began to do more tours.
Uh, uh, Most people don't know much about Tulsa. What you have a number of different tours that we spoke. I know you researched incredibly well. You do deep dives like a journalist. You are a journalist and writer. So, how did you? What tours do you have available, and what is that experience like?
So my favorite tour is the architecture tour. I'm not an architect, but I do like style and historic buildings. I used to be a tour guide in New York. And Tulsa, downtown Tulsa, has more than its fair share of Art Deco buildings. And we walk not too far, it's all flat, about an hour and a half, usually 2 hours because I tend to talk a lot, and go block by block talking about different buildings and how they fit into the architectural narrative of what came before Art Deco, why Art Deco came about, why it became popular, and then also why it faded from popularity. And Tulsa has a number of buildings, one next to the other in these different styles, because Tulsa was growing by leaps and bounds in the 19 teens, 20s. And so we were fortunate that buildings that have not been turned into parking garages are still very easily walked in the downtown core. So the architecture and Art Deco tour is something that people enjoy. And of course, Los Angeles has great Art Deco, and I've been on some Art Deco tours there. Got a little inspiration. Um, the most popular tour is a tunnel tour. There are a number of underground corridors that connect some of these historic office buildings, and that's particularly of interest to locals and people from Oklahoma who did not grow up with basements, maybe have never been on an underground metro or subway. It's a different use of space for them. And so they enjoy going underground and through the building lobbies. And so we talk about Tulsa's history that way. The tunnels themselves are actually not that exciting. They're pretty blank. But when you pair that with the history of the buildings, who built them, it brings these spaces to life. And then the tour that actually got some of the best reviews was a Greenwood Black Wall Street tour that I used to do. I don't do it anymore because now there is a museum that is available, and there's another guide in the neighborhood that I refer business to. But before those were options, there was an intense interest, especially approaching the centennial of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, about this history. And there was no real outlet for it, and people kept asking me. So I really researched it. I had to know my stuff because I am not Black and I am not from Oklahoma. So a New Yorker leading I did know Wall Street, the Wall Street in New York. I knew that. So that was a good experience, and was able to give people some perspective from a geographical standpoint of the lay of the land. I have a degree in geography, so I'm very interested in where things are located, why doesn't the landscape look different now? And so I was able to put things in perspective, because when you visit there today, if you look around, there's not that much there, even though it was successfully rebuilt against all odds after the burning in 1921. So that is another important part of the history of downtown Tulsa. And then I can do private custom tours based on interest. I have a self-guided tour for murals, and you can access that on my website. Tulsa has a lot of great street art, and there's meaning behind these pieces. So I connect the dots based on the artists and what they're trying to portray. And we also have Route 66, which is especially interesting to Europeans and increasingly Americans. And on my website, I have some points of interest on that. But at this time, I don't lead a tour of Route 66. I specialize in walking tours of the downtown, architecture, early oil history as well. So there's more than meets the eye in Tulsa. If you visit on your own, you're going to take a look around and be like, there's not much going on here. The streets are kind of empty. Let's move on. But with a good guide, you can help bring the buildings to life and understand why this was one of the world's most important cities 100 years ago.
It still has a lot of impact. Tulsa has a lot going on at this point, and it's constantly on the American news channels. Route 66, you mentioned, of course, I work a lot with European operators and guests, French-speaking and German-speaking market. And Route 66 is a big deal for Europeans. There's companies that specialize in those tours. And with Tulsa having a lot more to offer than a few years ago, all these activities and this revival downtown, what would you recommend for European visitors? How much time should they spend in Tulsa? It's no longer just a pit stop.
Yeah, Tulsa really does have a lot to offer. You can see Tulsa in, I don't know, an hour driving around, but it's really worth spending more time than that. And Europeans certainly appreciate architecture. And again, Tulsa has some interesting architecture. Some of it's classically based on Greco-Roman traditions from the sort of the pre-Art Deco. And then we have some nice zigzag Art Deco here at the height of Art Deco pre-crash. And then that turns into modernism, which I personally find ugly, but maybe it's going to have a moment again. And so it's an interesting diversity of architecture, all very walkable. And you combine some of that early oil history is really important because that oil helped win World War I and World War II. That was Oklahoma.
Mm.
So yeah, you could see Route 66. We have the Philbrook Museum of Art, which is an Italian style villa, 72-room villa with these English style landscape gardens for an oil man that built it. It's now a museum. And so yeah, there's some different museums, walking around the architecture, driving around Route 66, and stopping for a coffee. Tulsa has great local coffee and some a burgeoning craft beer scene as well. So these are popular places to stop and unwind and just relax for a minute. As travelers, we're so used to rushing around, checking things off our list, but Tulsa is a more relaxed place. So just spend a night or two here.
Mm. Yeah, I spent a whole week actually, and I still haven't seen everything I really was interested in. I did a lot of exploring of mural art, taking lots of pictures. I went to the Philbrook, which had a really interesting Wes Anderson related exhibit in the place which just closed. I got the last day. And then Gathering Place, that park is also, it's an award-winning park. There's so much to do and see. I was just blown away by all. And as you mentioned, people are friendly. I was taking pictures of this one mural, the famous Tulsa remote astronaut, and a gentleman came out of the building and explained the artist, the history, how fast it was done, how it was produced, or spray painted. And it was just a moment you wouldn't necessarily have in, let's say, Los Angeles. Tulsa had such a great mood. I really loved it. Um, what do you see happening? Is there already with Tulsa being mentioned by CNN on the global CNN travel list for 2022? And Good Morning America's travel correspondent, Pauline Frommer, putting Tulsa on the list. You got to see this year. Do you see an impact? Have you seen more interest? And what's a good time to come?
Yeah, there has been more interest in Tulsa for sure. The word has gotten out, and it is making a lot of lists in mainstream media. But I have only started doing these tours kind of during the pandemic, so my historical knowledge is not as I can't look back for years based on past tours because I'm relatively new. But probably it's a combination of media interest and people taking more road trips, traveling domestically, that they're willing to take a chance and visit Tulsa and see what the buzz is about.
How do people reach you? I found you on the web. What's your website? What's the best way to get a hold of you, to book a tour, and to get updates? How do people follow you? I, of course, will link all that information too, but please tell us where to go.
Sure, the easiest way is to visit the website, which is Tulsa.Tours. And that has a list of the different tours we have and the ones that I'm creating. So check us out there. It's very easy to get in contact with me if you don't see a time on the calendar that works for you. I offer public group tours as well as private tours. So yeah, it's a pretty user-friendly website with descriptions of all the tours.
Thank you very much. And then, of course, your book, West of Wheeling, available on Amazon. Oh, yes, there it is. I will post the link to West of Wheeling as well. It's a very compelling story about starting over. And I think it's really timely because we're all starting over. The pandemic changed everybody's life. We're doing things differently. We have to pivot and flip. And you're an inspiration. Thank you so very much for participating. And I'll see you soon.
See you in Tulsa.
Yep. Or over here if you're coming before I come back to Tulsa.
Agreed.
Great. Thank you so much.